My name is Tilde, and I'm here today to talk to you about making new habits stick with psychology and how you can use that to write code more efficiently. I first became interested in this topic at my previous gig when I was a software engineer at Pinterest. I worked there for a few years, like you do, and then I went up for a promotion, which I didn't get. And honestly, I thought that was pretty fair. My manager at the time gave me some feedback when I didn't get the promotion, which was that I wasn't writing enough code, and I was going to need to essentially double my output in order to get that promotion. So I was like, oh, shit. Now, just to give you a little context, I was mentoring a pod of early ID interns and a new grad at the time, so there were some pretty good reasons why I wasn't producing that much code output of my own. So some of it was, going to require shift in focus. But I also knew that I was going to need to change some of my habits. And I did a little research into the most effective ways to do that. So what I'm going to cover today are research-backed psychological tips on making new habits stick, what happened when I put these tips into practice in my own life, and some ways you can use your text editor to write code more efficiently. So let's talk research. Tip number 1, social accountability is key. Don't keep your goals to yourself. So you can tell a friend, you can tell your manager, or conference organizers hate this one weird trick, but conference-driven development is actually a form of social accountability. And part of why I wanted to give this talk was to motivate myself to change my habits even more. A study I found related to social accountability, they divided the participants into 2 groups. One group, or both groups, made goals for themselves. One group shared a weekly update with a friend about their progress. The other group kept their goals to themselves. Now, I'm sure you're not terribly surprised to learn that the group who shared their goals was more likely to complete them. But just how much more likely do you think they were? 20%. Nope. They were twice as likely. That's a huge difference. Tip number 2, make a contingency plan. The literature refers to these as if-then plans, but I keep wanting to call them if-else plans. I can't imagine why that might be. But anyway, the idea is that you think through what might go wrong and what you can do about it. So if this obstacle arises, then I will respond in this way. Like, let's say that you had a goal to work out 5 days a week, and normally you drive your car to the gym. Well, what if your car breaks down? Then you could go running instead. A study I found about if-then plans had to do with medication compliance, aka actually taking your medication as prescribed. Writing one sentence about how you're going to take your medication correctly meant that participants in this study took their medication correctly, or 79% of them took their medication as prescribed, as opposed to 55% of the group that didn't make a plan. Tip number 3, treat yourself. So this is B.F. Skinner. B.F. Skinner was the founder of a school of psychological thought known as behaviorism. Behaviorism studies behavior, because behavior can be measured more easily than, say, feelings. So B.F. Skinner came up with this device called a Skinner box, which you see up here. So in the Skinner box, you put a rat or a pigeon, and then with its little beak or its little paws, it pushes a lever, and out comes a little bit of food, sometimes, because what Mr. Skinner was studying was how can rewards be used to shape animal behavior. He came up with this theory called operant conditioning, which is a little too complicated for me to cover in full depth today, but there are two main things I'd like to highlight. It is easier to change your habits with reinforcement than it is with punishment. So do something nice for yourself when you get it right, rather than doing something mean to yourself when you get it wrong. It's more effective. It's science. The other thing is that I like to think about positivity when I'm framing my goals. So think about what you do want to do instead of what you don't want to do. I want to use more keyboard shortcuts instead of I want to stop using the mouse so much. The other thing about operant condition is that the timing of when you reward yourself really matters. The closer you can give yourself the reward to when you are doing the desired action, the easier the connection's going to stick in your brain. If any of you have ever trained a dog, you know you can't just push on its butt and get it to sit down and give it a treat 10 minutes later. I mean, you can, but the dog's not going to make the connection. And in our hearts, we're really a lot more like corgis than we care to admit. Tip number 4. Oh, no, actually. A reward doesn't need to be like some huge, giant thing. There are a lot of little rewards you can give yourself inside a moment. So you can ask for a high five, watch your favorite video on YouTube, stretch, take a selfie, or if you're working remotely, just tell yourself good job out loud. Tip number 4, repetition is key. So how many of you have heard it takes 30 days to start a new habit, or 21 days to start a new habit, or N days? Yeah, unfortunately, that idea is not backed up by research at all. So where did it even come from? In the 1950s, there was a surgeon named Maxwell Maltz, and he anecdotally observed some things in his patients. Like, he was a plastic surgeon, and he was like, oh, I gave this guy a nose job, and it took him 21 days to get used to his new face. This must apply to everybody, right? So Dr. Maltz wrote a book inexplicably titled Psycho-Cybernetics that was one of the first hugely popular self-help books, and it's still in print today, albeit in an updated edition. But yeah, other self-help book authors kind of like took this idea of it takes 30 days to start a new habit, and it snowballed from there. But so if it's not 30 days, then what does research tell us about what that value actually is? Well, one study showed that it took anywhere from 18 to 254 days. That's kind of a bummer. But one positive quote I wanted to highlight from this study is that missing one opportunity to perform the behavior did not materially affect the habit formation process. So you're going to screw it up. It's okay. The important thing is not to expect yourself to be perfect and to get better at getting back on the horse when you fall off. Tip number 5, reminders. So reminders can help you remember to do your new habit. And reminders are most useful in the context where the behavior is actually performed. I found another study about this that also had to do with medication, because I guess a lot of the research around habits is about drugs. Anyway, this study, it looked at what kind of reminders are actually helpful for getting people to take their medication. It tested reminders on a smartphone versus like a note on your bedside table for a nighttime medication. The note on your bedside table was actually more effective than the smartphone reminder was, which kind of makes sense because you're already in the place where you're trying to do the thing. So for your tweeting pleasure, here are all the tips on one handy-dandy slide. So what happened when I tried to put these tips into practice in my own life? Well, first, you kind of got to know what habits you need to change. So I was like brainstorming with my manager about how I could be more effective, and she asked me what I thought my problems were. And I was like, oh, I'm fighting with my IDE and my development environment all the time. And she was like, really? but I couldn't give her a concrete example, so she was a little skeptical. So what she asked me to do was keep a work log for a couple days and write down everything I was doing. And it's a really good idea because the same way that we performance profile our applications to see where they're slow, we got to performance profile ourselves to get real data about how we're spending our time. Now, just like performance profiling your application, there is a cost to collecting this data. So I'm not going to say that you should do it forever, but even just a couple days, you might find some surprising insights like I did. I also did this on paper because I didn't want it to get buried in a tab somewhere and forget to do it. Anyway, I thought I was fighting with my dev environment, but I was wrong. My biggest bottlenecks were actually finishing a task and not knowing what to work on next, getting stuck while debugging, and then getting distracted by the internet, which is super embarrassing. But at the same time, I'm sure I'm not the only one, and some of y'all fight with these same things. So I decided to start small because I know that you can't change all your habits at once. So I picked one thing to focus on, which was getting stuck while I was debugging. Now, I made a written plan for how I was going to tackle this. So don't get stuck while debugging is super vague, it's not specific or measurable, and it's kind of outside of my control. So I had to think about how can I turn this into something actionable. So I thought, oh, hey, I can ask for help and put a timer on it. So if I'm stuck for more than 15 minutes, then ask a teammate for help. And this is something like I have a really hard time asking for help in general. So this was definitely going to be challenging for me. So, the next thing is to make an if-then plan, right? So what could possibly go wrong with this? Well, my coworkers, as awesome as they are, they have their own lives and shit, so they might not always get back to me. So let's say if I'm stuck for more than 10 minutes, then write down my question for later and work on something else. So that also required me to get good at keeping a list of like small refactorings and other things that I could work on that may not be my top priority, but at least I could still be making progress on something. So I'm pretty into affirmations, so my visual cue was a reminder that, hey, people want to help me, and I would figure it out eventually. And my reward was to sneak off to the quiet room and use my self-massage tool for 2 minutes. Oh, yeah. So then I told my manager about this plan, and she was pretty supportive. And then we also set a time to check in the future. Because there's sort of like a built-in check-in time next time promotion rolled around, but I didn't want to wait that long to get feedback on how I was doing. So, how did it go? Well, I really wish Pinterest had been using GitHub so that I could look back on my contribution graph from that time period. Pinterest was using a competitor's product that didn't have a contributions graph, so I can't look back at it, but if I did, I'm sure it would look something like this. So I was able to I met my goal of doubling my amount of code output. But unfortunately, I didn't get that promotion because I left Pinterest to go join the Atom team at GitHub. And it was bittersweet to leave before I got the chance to apply for promotion again. But I love JavaScript, and I'm an Atom user, and I was really excited to join a team of awesome people and work on an open source project. So I really couldn't say no. So next, I'm going to shift gears a little bit and talk about ways you can use Atom to be more efficient. Because when I joined the Atom team, my mind was kind of blown by all these awesome features that I didn't know about before. And what I'm working on right now is combining my knowledge of how to change habits with my knowledge of these new Atom features to make my workflows even more efficient. Couple of caveats. I am talking about Atom because it's the editor I use and work on, but honestly, a lot of editors, especially IDEs, have pretty similar feature sets. So you might be able to get the benefit of some of these tips even if you're using a different editor. Another caveat is I'm going to tell you the keyboard shortcuts for Mac because it's the operating system that I use. But if you're a Windows or Linux user, it would be command or control instead of command, and then everything should still work as effective. So first, I'm going to talk about the command palette. How many of you have used the command palette? A lot of you. Great. I used to think it was this thing you had to open to install new add-in packages. But now I know that the really useful feature of the command palette is keyboard shortcut discoverability. So let's say you do what I did and you wrote down everything you were doing for 3 days. You're going to have a list of things you do all the time. And things you do all the time could be done incrementally faster if you're using the keyboard instead of the mouse. So if you open up the command palette with Command-Shift-P and then start typing something like the thing you're trying to do, you can see all the keyboard shortcuts that exist, which is very useful. If a keyboard shortcut doesn't exist for the thing you're trying to do, Atom allows you to BYO, by which I mean bind your own, of course. So in this example, I have rebound Command-Delete to be delete entire line because the shortcut for delete entire line is a 3-finger shortcut, and that's just too many keys for me to press. I don't have the time to cover customizing your key bindings in full depth because it's a little bit complicated, but there's a link to the flight manual that has this documentation that I would encourage you to read if you're super interested. The killer use case for multi-cursor is doing the same thing to different elements within text. So in this example, I have a bunch of React components that take a prop called command, and I'm changing it to new prop name because this isn't a contrived example at all. But I swear, I do this all the time. So you highlight the text you want to select, hit Command-D until all the other instances are selected, and then just start typing the new thing. Boom. Snippets. Snippets are ways of generating text from a shortcut. They're really useful for anything that's kind of boilerplatey. However, if you're just learning a new programming language, I would encourage you maybe not to use snippets because I think there's something about typing things out the long, hard way that can get syntax into your brain. So the anatomy of a snippet, it has a name, which is what shows up when you start typing it out. It has a prefix, which is the thing you actually type, and then it has a body, which is the code that's actually generated. So in this example, I type the shortcut, hit tab, and hit enter to autocomplete. And I've generated the scaffolding for some Mocha tests much faster than I otherwise could have. The other killer use case for snippets is if you're doing a talk that involves a lot of live coding, because typing while someone else is watching is one of the hardest problems in computer science. And I guarantee the audience is not riveted by watching you make typos. And you don't even have to come up with all the snippets yourself. Atom has a pretty rich ecosystem of community packages, and whatever language you're using, there's probably some other people who've written snippets packages already, and you just need to install them. Code folding. Folding is great for people who might get overwhelmed by having a lot of visual clutter on the screen. Folding allows you to collapse and expand blocks of code. You can fold and unfold individual blocks, or you can fold and unfold all with Option Command Shift open bracket or close bracket. Symbol finding allows you to jump right to a function with a specific string in the name. So in this example, I have a file that's doing a bunch of Git stuff, and I knew I was looking for the function named commit. I didn't just want to Command F find commit because that would give me a bunch of parameters and variables and things I didn't want. So I hit Command R to open up the symbol finder, start typing commit, and then hit enter to go right to where I wanted to go. You can use Command Control up or Command Control down to move entire blocks of text without mousing. It maintains indentation, it's fast, and it's weirdly satisfying to do so. So the part of Atom that I specifically work on is the Git and GitHub integration. So I'm super excited to talk to you about that. It's like switching context between your editor and the command line in github.com. It takes time, and it takes brain cycles that you might not have. You can do almost all the Git things you need to do in your day-to-day life right inside your editor. You can create a branch, publish a branch, make commits, amend an existing commit, and push. I'll show you. Whoa, OK, this is really complicated, so let's break down that UI a little bit. On the left, we have a diff view that's similar to what you'd get if you ran git diff on the command line. On the right, we have a list of staged and unstaged changes. On the bottom, we have a commit message box where you can type your commit message and actually make the commit, as well as a list of recent commits. And then on the bottom is where all the branchy things live, like creating a new branch, fetching, pushing, and pulling. One thing this UI makes easier, it's much easier to do than on the command line, is partial staging. So partial staging is making a commit when you have some uncommitted changes just kind of hanging out. It's very useful for if you want to tell a precise, beautiful story with your commits and just, yeah, be very neat about it. But not all teams care about commit level granularity. Some teams and some workflows only care about pull request level granularity. So if you use a squash workflow, then partial staging is not going to be that useful for you. I love that you can stage and discard things from the diff view because it has saved me the time and embarrassment of checking in numerous console log statements. You can even resolve merge conflicts right from inside Atom. Because show of hands, who loves merge conflicts? Oh, come on. So the thing that we've been focusing on most recently is the GitHub part of the integration. So if you have a project that has remote repositories hosted on github.com, you can see a list of open pull requests right inside your editor. Let's say you get curious about one of them and click on it. That opens a new pane where you can see a bunch of pull request details, you can see the build status, and a list of commit data. So the really useful part about this is the checkout button, because reviewing code is hard. You're building up this mental model of what this really abstract thing does without, being able to run it. And the checkout button, with one click, allows you to pull down that code into your editor so that you can run it yourself and put in logging and debuggers and just explore the code interactively. Now, it's true that you can do this with Git on the command line, but I don't have time to remember, I don't want to remember all those Git incantations. I want it to be easy for me. And this checkout button has definitely made it easier and made me a more thorough code reviewer. Shifting gears a little bit, let's talk about Markdown Preview. So Markdown is a language that's used for formatting. A lot of documentation and readmes are in Markdown. So you can see how your Markdown will be formatted right inside your editor by using Control-Shift-M. So the last Atom feature I'm going to show you is Teletype. Teletype is a real-time collaboration tool that allows two people to type text into the same editor. And because I got so much benefit from asking for help from my teammates, it would feel remiss not to include collaboration tools in my productivity tips. But I have a video that explains Teletype better than I ever could. Yeah. Teletype is super cool. My team uses it all the time. So in order to keep making Atom even more awesome, I need your help. We are kicking off a user research program so that we can learn more from our users. As Kelsey pointed out in an earlier talk, getting feedback from the people who use your product directly is so, so important. So you can sign up for a research session at the link. I've never made a QR code before, but there's a first time for everything. We also have a Twitter account. You can follow us. You can tweet your feedback there. And if you just want to talk to someone person to person, I'm going to be holding Atom office hours tomorrow in the mini theater. So if you have questions on how to use Atom, or you want to know more about our upcoming roadmap, please come see me. I would love to talk to you. So, in conclusion, here are some of the biggest things I learned. Refactoring your habits is necessarily an iterative and incremental process. Now, you can't change everything in your life at one time. But for me, picking one or two things that I'm going to be focusing on for changing my habits allows me to feel better about those things that I'm not focusing on right now. And just trust myself that small improvements made over time will add up. Yeah, so you're lying to yourself about how you're spending your time, which is okay because everybody does it. Like how I thought I was fighting with my IDs all the time, but I was really just fighting with distraction. And that might not be true for you. So I would encourage you to collect some data and make your own source of truth. So my quest to work on my productivity led me to question everything in a good way. So why did I want to write more code? Well, I wanted to get that promotion. Why did I want to get that promotion? As somebody who doesn't have a traditional CS background, I'm insecure about my skills. And I was working on the assumption that getting that promotion would help. And I'm sure it would have provided a temporary boost, but it doesn't fix the root problem. I need to, be able to generate those feelings of security and confidence for myself and not rely on the tech industrial complex for validation, because there's so many things about getting promoted that are outside of my control. And engineering productivity is so much more than how much code you write, because if you write 1 million lines of code for a product that no one's using or solving the wrong problem, that's not actually very productive at all. I think the reason that managers and, frankly, engineers focus on how much code we have written is because that is so much easier to measure than, what is the value that I'm bringing back to users? What's the value I'm bringing back to the company? So I decided to refocus. And instead of promotion being my biggest goal, I'm focused on doing tasks that bring me the most satisfaction and bring the most value to the product and have impact, like trying to get more people to contribute to Atom and kicking off our user research program. So I still care about code and productivity, and I'm still using these tips on changing my habits. It's just that I've shifted my focus a bit, and it feels so much better. So at the end of the day, go forth, try to iterate and iterate towards a better version of yourself. But don't lose sight of the goal and the reason you started in the first place. And don't forget to be kind to yourself along the way. Thank you.